Hi friends, after all the videos I've done and seen, something is giving me a feeling that you guys aren't struggling with keys level 17 and above with your own party of elite gladiator dragon slayers. Something is giving me a feeling that you have been slacking on gear and finding competent teammates, reserving yourselves to pugging. I've seen numerous complaints saying stuff like, "But Cromdar, disc is weak, I can't time 9s and 10s with pugs, my heals do nothing, my teammates are bad." You do not need to worry. In this video, I pick out the worst pugs I can find, which ideally have never done a 10 before, put on 195 item level gear myself, and time the damned key, carrying my group to victory. And if I can do it, so can you.
No, 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 no.
Alright, meme time's over. So this is the start of the run. As you've seen, our group is not very experienced at this point. I've also lowered my item level to 195. Luckily, Spires of Ascension is a relatively easy dungeon to do if you want to time your first 10. I would definitely recommend doing this, maybe Mists or Halls of Atonement. Those three would be the easiest. Arguably, this is one of the easier ones because Tank doesn't have to worry too much about the routing here. The dungeon is kind of straightforward. So to start off with the first pack, since I cannot communicate with my group, here I grip my rogue through the weapon I've dispelled. That way he can get the effect from it because, as you've understood, I'm playing with pugs, so we're not communicating on voice chat. So pugs aren't aware of a lot of mechanics that are happening here. And I take some initiative sometimes to pull people through the weapons that are dropped when menders are dispelled. I've also assigned some interrupts before the run in order to make sure that the fist never goes off. I think through the run only one of the fists goes off on the whole party, and that's actually in my head a big success. But overall, as you can see, there are some interrupts overlap. That's also a common thing to see in pugs. They see a cast, they interrupt it as soon as possible, and naturally the party sees the cast at the same time, so they all want to interrupt it, so they all waste an interrupt at the same time. That happens really often, and that can lead to a lot of wipes. Here I opened with Dome just to put it on cooldown and make sure the tank doesn't dip immediately. As you've seen, this tank is very, very poorly equipped to tank a 10. So I expect him to dip very, very heavily on pulls, especially if he might not have defensives up. And I believe it happens one or twice during the encounter too, when the tank is a bit low in HP, he pulls and then he dies pretty much immediately, or at least procs cheat death. So for me, when healing pugs, after a few runs in this item level with equipped and unequipped pugs, the biggest reason why people wipe, especially with a Disciplined Priest as a healer, is because the tank pulls mobs with 50 or less % HP. If the tank pulls the next pack with 50% HP, you have to waste a lot of Shadow Mints to take him out of near-death situations, while at the same time the rest of the party starts going down. Since you don't have a lot of tools to efficiently bring all the bars up at the same time, that is why a lot of Disc Priests struggle in pugs, in my opinion. That's where I had issues with, and I've quickly adapted. By the end of each pull, I do my best to make sure that the tank is 100% HP, so that I don't have to focus him too much at the start of the fight when we pull the next trash pack. And overall, it has worked quite well here. That is one of the tips I can definitely suggest. Keep making sure the tank is at 100% before he pulls. Second tip, definitely use Penance defensively more often here. Penance is very mana efficient. You can use it on the move if you need to reposition. It's amazing when it's empowered by Purge the Wicked. So Purge the Wicked, more applications of Purge the Wicked doesn't actually increase the proc rate that you get. So as long as you have one out, you will get the procs that you need. If the tank is low, do not hesitate to Penance the tank. It is very strong. It's absolutely massive. In addition to that, as you've seen before, I use Dome, it's on cooldown. I use Rapture now to make sure my party doesn't go down too hard. There, my tank is getting absolutely smashed at this point. And he's also using defensive. So surprisingly, for the Raider IO I've been playing with, I am very pleased with their cooldown usage. Especially the tank, he was aware of what he was doing. None of the people here knew what Prideful was, so this is their first Prideful in the game. Some had an idea of what it does, but nobody has experience dealing with it. And here actually we spawned the Prideful with the Mender. There's another weapon down. I don't think my party sees it, so in these cases I would definitely try to grip people through it. There, I tried to grip the Rogue, but he just barely misses the weapon, unfortunately. And I think because I grip him, he hits the tank. And the whole party isn't exactly sure what they're doing, but luckily it's a 10. You don't need too much healing output to heal this. 10s are definitely doable with lower item level gear, as a priest especially. You do have some massive healing with Twist of Fate procs and your Covenant abilities. I personally prefer Kyrian. Obviously, it does absolutely massive damage, and it prevents the party from dying if you have Radiance up at the same time. But Venthyr is also fine. Necrolord is a bit weaker. Night Fae is a bit weird. I wouldn't recommend it for dungeons, but if you're playing it, it shouldn't be that much of an issue. You're just missing one defensive cooldown. This boss isn't problematic. The biggest worry for me here is having the tank getting one-shot by the ability, so I really try to make sure he's at reasonable HP levels. Unfortunately, as you see there, every auto attack brings him down by like 30%, so I do have to tunnel him a bit. But with Prideful up, I don't have a lot of issues with that. My Shadowments are doing massive healing. At the same time, I try to do some damage. With lower item level, there's... actually, I was surprised how little damage I lose by losing 20 item level. I've only lost about, I think, 300 DPS overall by losing 20 item level. It definitely speaks about the Disc Priest damage floor. So their damage ceiling isn't too high. They cannot do absolutely massive damage like Rested Druids. But Discipline Priest do have a very high damage floor. No matter what, you will always be doing some sort of DPS. Whereas other healers, they are forced to, in high damage situations, they have to forego damage completely, and have to focus on healing. So here, my party isn't exactly sure of the routing. I try to direct them a bit. They do grab all the Steel Claws, which can be really problematic for the tank. I PS him on pull immediately, so he doesn't die. Even through PS, you saw him go down to 30%. I follow up into Rapture immediately. Here, in these pulls, I PI pretty much on cooldown. It's fortified. We can use PI on every single pull. The tank has 7 stacks of bleed on himself. He's running, he's kiting, he's very good. He's aware that he's supposed to be kiting these. He doesn't just stand there and tank them. He does Fell Devastation and keeps running. We did overlap some kiting abilities there with the Vortex and my knockback, but that's fine. The tank is up to 10 stacks now, and this is absolutely lethal for him. So I was very pleasantly surprised at his knowledge of the game. He, as we've seen, the average Raider IO without me is around 500 of this party. So these people somehow have more knowledge of the game than some 1k rated IO players I've played with. It is absolutely astonishing. And this is not an exception. I've done the Sanguine Depths and Mists 10 with random pugs too, and they've all had very, very good knowledge of the game. But their listening abilities aren't that good. I told them not to take the Angel. They still decide to go there. And that's fine, we adapt the route. I had the route in mind, but going here was slightly new to me, and since there are 2 Goliaths, which require a lot of interrupts, I was kind of scared of this pack. But we end up pulling through it with only 1 death, I believe. So this pack is not difficult. We do have some aggro issues sometimes. The tank is definitely on the squishier side, and naturally he has less damage too, because he has less agility. But he's doing a good job. He was doing a very, very good job overall. Same goes for the rest of the party. The rogue is doing some massive damage. He is my main power infusion target overall throughout the dungeon. Rogues don't benefit too much from it, but it's still it's still a good buff for them. And since he's the highest damage dealer, I think the effect was the best on him. So this is the double Goliath pack. I quickly assign interrupts as a preventative measure, just to make sure that they know what they're doing. As I have a new keyboard, I spilled some orange juice on my keyboard. I had to get a new keyboard, so I do a lot of typos, so I have to delete stuff, and I wasn't that fast on the typing. I actually decided to pull, and as you saw there, on pull, my tank immediately procs cheat death. Immediately, he just gets slapped to death, and there's the first fist coming out. These are the situations that I think most pugs will wipe to. Luckily, on this difficulty, it will not one-shot if 1 fist goes through. As long as you just heal through it and don't panic, it's fine. If you're playing without a tank who has cheat death, then that's a problem. And here I have PS up, I use it immediately. Throughout this dungeon, if you look at my cooldowns exclusively, I think my pain suppression and my barrier are always on cooldown. There is no reason, especially on fortified, to keep them. When the tank is pulling, you can dome him. Especially if it's a big pack. If it's 5 or so mobs at the same time and the tank jumps in, he will have trouble at this point. So just dome immediately, minus 25% damage taken for 10 seconds. It will save him his life. It's okay only to use it on one tank, maybe some melees. It is definitely fine. Most dungeons do not require the whole party to stand in a dome, with rare exceptions. Of course, sometimes you do need them, but on a 10, tank dying is definitely the biggest danger. The second biggest danger I found was actually ninja pulling. Ninja pulling was what causes a lot of wipes, so as long as the party just calms down a bit, realizes that timing stuff is easy, and on 10s the time pressure really isn't that bad, unless the DPS is horrible. As long as you don't ninja pull and wipe, you will time the dungeon. The groups do have enough DPS. We have an average item level of 100, I think around 96. We're far below what the rewards are for these type of dungeons, and we're still very easily timing them because of the damage. Damage dealt is not the problem is the tank surviving, definitely. And this priest is actually very good for that, because our defensives don't scale with item level that much. Pain suppression and dome are both percentage-wise defensives. If you're 300 item level or 100 item level, your pain suppression will still reduce the damage by 40% no matter what. So that's very good. Your 2 defensives are very, very strong. Naturally, Rapture depends on your intellect, because shields scale the intellect. But you already have 2 defensives, which are massive. In addition to that, if you're Kyrian, you have a 3rd defensive, which full heals the entire party in 2 casts, and keeps the party healed for 10 seconds, and they just cannot die. It's absolutely amazing. You have 3 actually very, very strong defensives. Here, the patrol gets a bit unlucky, and the rogue isn't aware he has distract, so if the rogue were a bit better, he would actually go ahead and distract the bigger patrol, so we could pull the birds first. But we kind of end up waiting here for quite a bit, because both patrols come to us at the same time. And this ends up being a bit of a time waste, but as you can see here, we are very good on time. The druid is slightly slacking on damage. The hunter is actually BM. I have not played with a BM hunter before. The good thing about them is they don't need to summon their pet when they have to bloodlust. They always have their pets out. But otherwise, I think marksman does quite a bit more damage in dungeons. And as you can see here, both patrols are at the stairs at the same time. And we just end up waiting for like 30 or so seconds, because it's difficult to coordinate. unfortified. If you pull both of these, that's pretty much an instant wipe. There we go, the tank pulls with chains. For some reason, he pulls them all to him, gets slapped immediately to 50% HP. I just dome in the opener, make sure he survives a bit longer, so the group stabilizes. Once the group is stable and you've started pulling and the damage goes out, not a lot can go wrong if you don't stop healing, depending on the key level, obviously. And here, for example, my tank is taking 1 stack, and the rogue is taking some random damage too. So I PS the tank to make sure he doesn't die to top off the rogue. If the tank is PS'd, he's highly unlikely to die, but unfortunately here he has no cheat death and he ends up getting slapped to death. We do have a combat res. We survive just very barely. The druid has aggro, but he reses the tank and we make it out of this pack alive, very luckily. The problem is also that this pack is prideful, so this is one of the trickier packs in the dungeon, definitely. And I've actually completely forgotten to pick up the spear in the previous platform, as I realized at this point. I was a bit tunneling on the healing and keeping up with the strategies. So I completely forgot to pick up the spear in the previous platform. The plan was originally to spear the pack before the second boss, which is quite problematic. And here the tank wasn't really watching the swirlies, but that's fine. Prideful doesn't do a lot of damage. But yes, that pack before the second boss is one of the most difficult packs in the whole dungeon. Absolutely massive. They don't take any AoE damage because of the squad leader. So on higher keys we just crowd control the pack and pull the squad leader pretty much alone or with something else. Here the plan was to spear it and kill the squad leader fast, but I forgot the spear, so we have to deal with it normally. We kill the prideful relatively easily. These guys have had quite an easy time with prideful, luckily. And then we go into the serpents. You should aim to dispel the tank at around 4 stacks. Ideally he should be, under prideful tanks shouldn't be popping defensives because your healing should be enough to heal them. You're healing 30% more. It's pretty much like 1 minute wings or 1 minute healing cooldown. That helps you heal through everything. So the tank shouldn't need a lot of stuff under prideful, but obviously if there's a huge pack, feel free to pop some defensives on him too to help him survive, because under prideful sometimes people get a bit excited, 30% damage dealt, they pull a bit more, and they don't realize they don't take less damage, they only do more damage. And the tanks think that, oh, the healer is doing 30% more damage, but it's hard to heal when the tank gets one shot immediately. So defensives really help with that. And there you kind of have to use your personal judgment to make sure that the tank survives the pull. Again, very big deal. Have the tank at 100% every single pull. If you can just make sure he's aware of that, not to pull when he's 50% HP, that will definitely prevent you from going behind on healing by a lot. So here I dictate them to CC some mobs a bit, and they actually follow through. That's absolutely amazing to me. But we end up CCing about 2 mobs, I think, or 3 mobs, and I think that saved us our life. There we have 1 banish. Actually, no, it's just 1 mob that gets CC'd. I put pain suppression immediately. The tank has meta up to, as you can see on the Omni CD. So I've started using Omni CD, a very useful add-on which you can easily set up, which shows all the cooldowns. I just generally show DPS cooldowns, so I know who to PI, and defensive cooldowns for the tank, and to call out maybe defensives for my party. And overall it's a very nice add-on. It's not a weak aura. I've switched away from the weak aura. It's a bit harder to modify. Omni CD has been nice for the interrupts and for the cooldowns. I really like it. I'm gonna go ahead and leave a link below to download the add-on. And here we end up bringing the squad leader nearly last, somehow. The party isn't aware of how squad leaders work here. They don't, at this point that these keys, party members don't really read what's written on the mobs. So as you can see, the BM Hunter is doing nearly no damage because of the reduced AoE damage taken. And as a result, we end up taking quite a bit of damage, but that's not a big issue again. There's mainly tank damage coming out here, some random damage too, but that can be spot healed, that's fine. So this is a fortified week. On a tyrannical week, this boss would be quite a big problem, and you really would want to make sure that you have prideful for this. Luckily, this is a fortified week, so the boss is relatively easy. We do have reasonable DPS. Again, these people are low raid IO, but just because people are low raid IO doesn't mean that they do no damage. Doesn't necessarily mean it. Sometimes it does, but perhaps I got lucky. Again, these are not paid actors. I did not pay these people. I did not make them put lower gear on, or they don't have any mains. They are, at least maybe their mains are not connected at least, but they've stated that they've shown that they're not really sure how prideful works, so they haven't done a 10 before. And here the druid is taking some random damage. He was helping me off heal there too. So I found that people at lower raid IO are somehow much more likely to help out the party, especially hybrid classes. They are very, very scared of all the mechanics, so they will instinctively heal themselves. And that's I found that actually astonishing. People at 1k, they will really just push all the responsibility to the healer, even if they screw up themselves. And people at lower raid IO have surprisingly been very, very good players. For their rating, it's obviously not consistent. Not every player at the lower raid IO is good, but I've been very pleasantly surprised, and I actually recommend you to try that too. Just experiment with it. Prepare to destroy one of your keys. Accept people without raid IO, maybe with low raid IO. Without raid IO, sometimes it's a bit wonky. And here at this point, I am really not sure what's happening with the percentages, because to go up and trigger prideful for the last boss, you need 88%. So you need 88% or more before you go all the way to the last boss platform. And I don't remember the percentages by heart, obviously, so we kind of wing it here. And that leads to a bit of trouble, but overall this is fine. This segment was a bit complicated to explain to them, because there's some shrouding and some pathing going on. It's a bit complex, but I've tried my best to do that. And we pull the first mob here. It does quite a bit of pulsing AoE damage, quite a bit of tank damage, so this is a bit intense, but luckily I have Twist of Fate proc, and at this point it's easy to heal. I explained to them after that these mobs can be skipped. If you're a Disc Priest watching, definitely explain that to the people. Some people aren't sure you can skip the next pack. I'm pretty sure you don't even need Mind Soothe. It's not necessary. But the pack after that, you either have to Shroud or Mind Soothe. I'm pretty sure it cannot be skipped with Mind Soothe. Maybe you can have a Warlock Gate. Warlock Gate will also let you skip the next pack. But otherwise, I'm not aware of a method. So to skip it, you just go behind the columns, and the two mobs in front of you, you can just Mind Soothe. We have a rogue, so I ask for a Shroud, and our tank actually falls a bit behind here. He's not watching the chat. He's not aware. He just stays still. We mount up, but the tank stays behind, and now he obviously stays behind because he's not mounted. And he's not sure what's happening now. You can see him on the minimap, he stayed behind. And now I call out to pull the usurpers all together. Go behind the line of sight. Sometimes tanks don't do that, so luckily I have the greatest repositioning tool of all times. He just kind of stays there, and I grip him to us. And now this pull can be a bit rough and fortified. These do randomized group damage, so I just dome immediately to have the whole group take 25% less damage. And luckily, we make it through quite easily. Since they're all stacked in melee, they don't actually cast any spears, and you can knock them out towards the end to make sure to avoid sanguine. On Tyrannical, this boss would also be a problem for pugs. They're not really sure how to stack orbs, and explaining it is relatively difficult. I have a feeling a lot of players at this level, they're kind of getting familiar with the abilities they have, so they're watching their action bars a bit more than what's happening at the boss. And they forget to do certain mechanics. So for example here, we're kind of all over the place with the orbs, especially the druid. It's quite clear he's not well aware of the tactics here, since the orbs are all over the place, but luckily they end up doing not a lot of damage. It's not a tyrannical week. Overall it's easy. The melee DPS fortunately knows not to stack on the boss. This rogue was surprisingly good for his Raid Royale too. I was very pleased. Because if you get stacked on the boss and you take a charged stomp, it deals quite a bit of damage. And again, our orbs are all over the place. The rogue actually ends up dying, but luckily we have combat reses. And since the druid gets targeted, the rogue reses next to the druid and he also takes the blast. But overall this is fine to heal, just to prevent a wipe I rapture. Make sure there's no danger coming out now. And I actually end up, I believe, ideally I want to Boon of the Ascended for his damage increase taken phase. But here I slightly mistime it, as you can see. I was watching kind of the animations of the boss and I thought he stomped for some reason, but he didn't, he just did a normal attack. So I wasted half the boon without dealing extra damage. And now my party luckily knows what's happening. I help them soak too. As you can see, the hunter is not using turtle to soak. Hunters can soak this with turtle. Rogue has used cloak before, so he doesn't have cloak to soak the orbs. And so the whole party is kind of at 5, 4, 3 stacks, but luckily they can be healed. Since the tank doesn't take massive damage here, and he's tanky by nature, if a lot of people are taking orbs, feel free to pain suppression somebody and tunnel healing somebody else. So here I make sure that they don't go up, because if they go up we're gonna have trouble with Prideful after, but luckily we're very, very good on time. Again, if you can see, we have 2 deaths and we're very far ahead on the enemy forces. This dungeon is very, very easy on the timer. If you want to time at 10 for a weekly, maybe an 11 after that, this is one of the places you want to go, especially on Fortified. Fortified, this dungeon is pretty easy, in my opinion. As long as the tank is healthy, nothing can really go wrong. On certain packs there is some random damage coming out, but overall this is fine. This is some very unusual Prideful timing too, but actually very fortunate. The Prideful somehow ended up being very, very good here. We have some Sanguine problems here and some threat issues. I actually pulled Threat and I didn't have Fade, so the Prideful actually slapped me there a few times. But not a big issue, again. It's the start of the Prideful and the whole party doesn't take that much extra damage from it. So this Prideful was actually very good for a few reasons. One is we have to clear downstairs for some extra %, and the packs that remain downstairs are very difficult. They are borderline impossible. If you go right from here, from when we are now, that pack is not doable in Fortified. It deals absolutely enormous damage. So we instead go left, and this is a more doable pack. We have to clear this, and I believe we still don't hit 88%, so we end up clearing the pack in the middle too. Just some randomized damage going out here. As you saw there, my tank goes down to 40% HP with the dome, so without the dome he would be at 0 likely, and maybe proc cheat death. But after that, as you can see, he stops taking damage. The reason why tanks dip really hard on the first hit is because they forget to put defensives up on pull. They think like, oh, my defensive lasts a very short time, so I'm gonna delay it as much as I can, and I'm gonna jump into combat without my defensive, because I'm wasting like precious milliseconds of it. But that's actually a mistake, because the first hit that they take is absolutely massive. And since we're at 86%, we still don't have enough %, so we have to take this pack. I was surprised to see they actually fixed this pack. So before, if you pulled the Forsworn Warden, the Goliath would just stand still and cast fists. They fixed that. The Goliath actually goes into combat with you now, he starts running to you immediately, but he still casts fist immediately. And the Hunter had very good reflex there to interrupt the fist. That was an amazing job. Luckily the fists don't go through here, and this ends up being a relatively easy pack. Just some randomized damage coming out from the Justicar, who's doing Dark Lash, which is a random targeted ability. Another weak aura that I can really recommend is seeing the which party member is targeted by the random damage. That is very useful. I'll make sure to find it and post it in the description below too. I don't have it here, but I actually need to install it myself. I keep forgetting to do that. And again, as you can see here, mostly it's the tank taking damage. I have PS up, but I'm just saving it. We still have only one Goliath left. He's not gonna take any more damage. He has meta, so not a big issue. Some Sanguine issues here. The Goliath he went to recharge inside Sanguine. Sanguine can cause some trouble this week with especially Sanguine Depths the last corridor. If General Khal there touches Sanguine, she will regenerate a lot of her HP. And since it's fortified, she already has a lot of HP. It's percent based, so every time to face her you need 10% throughout the corridor. It is a very massive issue. Sanguine Depths is very, very, very difficult to time this week with pugs. Our DKA just kept running through the whole corridor. We cleared the entire corridor before killing the first phase of General Khal. That was hilarious to look at. It was not as hilarious to heal though, but that's fine. So on this last platform we still have 10 minutes to time this dungeon. My party is doing very well. I'm very pleased with them at this point. They're using cooldowns, they sort of know the tactics, some little min-max things they're not sure of, but it's fine, it's a 10. It's not a big issue. You don't need to do a lot of healing here. As long as some things are interrupted, it's really not a problem. I make sure to pull from left to right here as you come, because the rightmost angel will do massive damage, and it will allow the other angels to do massive damage too. So the first angel has charged spears, but this is a completely avoidable ability, and having other angels have it is not an issue again. The biggest problem with these spears is if people have low graphic settings, they will not see the shockwaves from them. That has happened to me before, and specifically for this dungeon I have to turn up my graphic settings. But otherwise it's really not a problem. You also need to keep in mind that the spears, the combat doesn't end immediately when the target dies. As you see here, we're still in combat for like a good 5 seconds. And so the charged spears keep pulsing as well, and then people like to take damage from them because they start running around. So I told them to wait a bit and then pull. Second mob, second angel, slightly bigger problem. There were actually some frontal issues here, and there the hunter gets clipped by the frontal. I'm surprised the druid didn't get clipped there, actually. Seeing this again, he was really close to that. But luckily it doesn't one-shot, so you can heal through it. Overall, not an issue. Again, there's some slight AoE damage pulsing here. I actually just decide to step into the shockwave to proc Twist of Fate. I'm just kidding, I just missed it. But luckily I proc Twist of Fate, so I just do a bit more healing. That might actually have saved my tank cheat death there, that I stepped into the shockwave. So you could try some spicy shenanigans if you're up for that. I get shadow locked, but it's not a problem. Quaking is relatively easy. If you're running Solace, you have something to cast during quaking. It's not a difficult affix overall. And here this way, since the last angel before the last boss is the biggest problem, we have Prideful for it this time. So as you see here, the Prideful timing is surprisingly good. And my party is getting clipped by some swirlies. I make sure that the tank knows how to use the spear, because the run I did before was quite a mess with spears. But my tank is very confident, so I give him a little shout out. It's important to have some positive motivation in the group, and that positive reinforcement is always good, better than negative, and the frustration is never going to lead to anything. So even if you're frustrated, try to refrain from voicing it. Obviously that's not the same as constructive criticism, but here we have Prideful. I spear the last ad because she is a much bigger problem than the boss. The boss is very easy compared to this last ad in Fortified. We still have 7 minutes to time this, and so far this is looking very, very good for us. She's pulsing AoE damage. Luckily she doesn't do it if you use the spear as early as possible on her. And as you can see here, I tell my party to just do massive damage to her, because if she stays alive for long, she's worse than the Prideful. She does absolutely massive unavoidable damage later on. 6 minutes and 30 seconds to kill the boss. I'm not really worried at this point. The biggest danger here is making sure people know to stack on the shield. Sometimes people forget, and I make sure to remind them. Otherwise the boss is really easy. If people do orbs at this point on 10s, these people didn't have any raid Ryo, and they were aware of the tactics, so there is really no excuse for your group to not know the tactics. Again, there I make sure that you know to stack on the shield. You do have leap faith in case somebody forgets, so that's good. Remind them once more, because again, really the only issue here is not stacking in the shield, and the druid might not have made it there actually. If I didn't pull, I just got a bit worried, so I pull him to me, just to be sure. Really no risk in that. Mass Dispel, the 2 debuffs that come out after. After she explodes, she applies 2 stacks of Lost Confidence, 1 on 2 random party members. And I actually use Mass Dispel there, but I end up not having Mass Dispel for the end of this phase actually, which was a bit of a mistake on my part. But overall, didn't end up being an issue, not tyrannical, so. For this phase of movement, I try to shield everybody with manual shields. This is one of the only places where just shielding people is good, because you can do it on the move to pick up the orbs, and you will still prevent the damage, so that's very good. Using shields on cooldown here, and maybe some Shadow Mans is very healthy. Actually, I do end up having Mass Dispel here, but since we had such low stacks, I just didn't bother with it. As you saw there, my party wasn't taking any damage. The boss is at 50%, it's looking very solid for us. Another issue is the tank dying, but he still has cheat death. I just make sure he's topped off. Not panicking too is very important. I know sometimes people get really excited, timer is close, the boss is close to dying, people start making mistakes. I think we're all familiar with that situation where you see the boss low, you see the timer about to get depleted, and you start just doing risky plays. And most of the time that leads to deaths and to wipes. And that's very frustrating for everyone to see. That has happened to me lately. And it's just important to to actually perhaps close the timer somehow. I think it would help a lot of people if the key level wasn't there, and if the timer wasn't there. If you don't see what key you're doing, what key level you're doing, there's definitely some psychological pressure behind, I think. Especially when you're doing higher keys, when you're doing a key you've never done before, you're like, oh, okay, this is the highest I've been. I don't know if I can do this, but you definitely can. Like once you do the key, you're like, why was I worried? I know it happens to me. I'm sure it happens to everybody too. And here, balance is at 4%. 3, 2, 1. And this is a timed key with a party of an average of 600 600 raid royale, perhaps less if you don't consider me. I get some loot, but luckily I don't need any of it. And again, these were some of the nicest guys I've played with. This is the gear I'm using, 195 item level. You can get this gear from your Covenant Sanctum this week if you're Renown 21. This is pretty much free gear. You can get that. You just cannot get the weapons and the rings and the neck. Everything else you can get. It is very easy to get. We're very glad we timed this now, and overall it's been a very nice experience. It was really cool for the stream to see too how this goes. I'll see in the future if I can perhaps go to lower item levels and perhaps time the same difficulty dungeons, or go higher. Definitely. There we go. There, get some praise there from the party. Always nice to hear too. If you have some leadership going, it definitely helps. Definitely helps. All right, this is it for my plus 10 in low item level with unexperienced people. I'll try to do more guides like this because I think it's a bit more useful for you guys to see how to heal pugs. And on this note, I'll see you next time, guys. Thanks for watching.